It is absolutely wonderful to be here today at the 26th Border Governors Conference in the heart of Hollywood and at the very center of movie-making magic, Universal Studios. This conference is in recognition of all their efforts to move all 10 states forward into the new world. And if you listen to the governors and to the people advising them, that world looks like it's going to get a lot greener, which is great. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is among the world's foremost environmental leaders. He currently serves as senior attorney at the National Resources Defense Council and is the author of 5 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Crimes Against Nature. His success in fighting for the environment has spanned the Americas, from his home state in New York to Latin America and Canada, where he assisted indigenous people in protecting their homelands. For his tireless and courageous work, Time magazine named him among the heroes for the planet. Please welcome Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my cousin, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Schwarzenegger, for having me here and say what an honor it is to be speaking to this extraordinary group of political leaders from the United States and from Mexico. The thought that I wanted to start out with was just the premise that good environmental policy 100% of the time is identical to good economic policy. If we want to measure our economy, and this is how we ought to be measuring it, based upon how it produces jobs and the dignity of jobs over the generations, over the long term. If, on the other hand, we want to do what some of the polluters occasionally urge us to do, which is to treat the planet as if it were a business in liquidation, convert our natural resources to cash as quickly as possible, have a few years of pollution-based prosperity, we can generate an instantaneous cash flow and the illusion of a prosperous economy, but our children will pay for our joyride, and they'll pay for it with denuded landscapes, with poor health, and huge cleanup costs that are going to amplify over time and that they'll never be able to pay. Environmental injury is deficit spending. It's a way of loading the costs of our generation's prosperity onto the backs of our children. And one of the things that I've done over the past 25 years as an environmental advocate is to constantly go around and confront this argument that an investment in our environment is a diminishment of our nation's wealth. It doesn't diminish our wealth. It's an investment in infrastructure. The same as investing in telecommunications and road construction. It's an investment we have to make if we're going to ensure the economic vitality of the coming generations. I'm glad that Secretary Chertoff was here and is involved in this, because one of the things that I would say to you, emphasize, is that all of the things that we need to do to solve environmental problems like global warming are things we ought to be doing anyhow to ensure our prosperity, to reduce our deficits, to improve our balance of payments, to reduce the possibility of entanglements with Mideastern dictators who despise democracy, who are hated by their own people, and who we should have nothing to do with, and to improve our air quality and our water quality and, of course, our national security and our prosperity. People say, well, we shouldn't sign the Kyoto Protocol because it will put us at a competitive disadvantage with China. But in fact, if you think about it, it makes no sense. Today, we spend in the United States 12% of our GNP on energy. The Japanese spend 7%, the Germans spend 8%. That means every product that we create in this country at its birth is 5 or 6% more expensive than an identical product created in Japan or Germany. Environmental care makes us more, and efficiency makes us more competitive internationally. I wrote in May an article for Vanity Fair magazine in which I talked about a speech that was given by Lord David Putnam in front of Parliament last November, when Parliament was debating a global warming bill about cap and trade, which Parliament ultimately passed. But Lord Putnam was addressing the people in England. Everybody believes that global warming is true, is real, and it's upon us, and it's going to be catastrophic. Lord Putnam was addressing the people who said, well, yes, we've got to do something about it, but we have to move slowly. We have to move incrementally or our economy will be in ruins. And he reminded Parliament that exactly 200 years before, the same body had debated the abolition of the slave trade. And at that time, everybody in Great Britain believed that the slave trade was a moral catastrophe for Great Britain and that it had to be abolished. But at the same time, there were people who said, we have to go slowly. The slave trade represents 25% of the GNP of Britain. It is the primary source of energy for the entire British Empire, free human labor. If we abolish it overnight, the economy will be in ruins. But after 1 year of debate, Parliament did the right thing, made the moral choice, and abolished the slave trade outright. And instead of collapsing, the British economy exploded as entrepreneurs rushed into that space to create new forms of energy, mainly mechanical. And that launched the Industrial Revolution, which was the greatest epic in wealth creation in the history of mankind. And what had happened was the abolishment of the slave trade had exposed all of these hidden inefficiencies that are associated with free human labor. And today, we don't need to abolish carbon to understand that it is the primary drag on American capitalism. We are giving $1 trillion a year in subsidies to the oil industry in the United States. And Terry Tammet, who is the former assistant to Governor Schwarzenegger, has scrupulously documented those subsidies in his book, Lives Per Gallon, which I urge you to read. We give about $1 trillion to the coal industry in free federal subsidies every year, and about half that to the nuclear industry. When I was a little boy, me and my cousin Maria Shriver, who I see over there, when we were young growing up, our nation controlled half of the wealth on the face of the earth. Today, we are watching that wealth be the greatest transfer in wealth in the history of mankind. We are borrowing $1 billion a day in this country, mainly from nations that don't like us, in order to import oil, mainly from nations that don't like us. This is why the American dollar has collapsed. This is why our economy is in shambles. And we have, if you look at all of the nations that have decarbonized their economies, in every case, they have experienced immediate and extraordinary prosperity. Iceland is an example. In 1970, Iceland was the poorest country in Europe. It imported 100% of its coal and oil. It made a choice because it was one of the first nations to see the impacts of global warming, which impacts the northern latitudes disproportionately. It made a choice to get off of carbon. And people at that time warned the government of Iceland, we can't do this quickly, but Iceland went ahead and did it anyway. And today, Iceland is 100% energy independent. It gets 90% of its electricity from geothermal, and it is the fourth richest country by GDP on the face of the earth. It is a net energy exporter. It cannot run lines across the Atlantic Ocean, so it imports bauxite from Jamaica and uses its surplus energy to smelt that bauxite into aluminum and then sells it on the world market. 15 years ago, no company would dream of relocating to Iceland. But today, companies are lined up to relocate to Iceland to take advantage of its cheap, abundant energy and the high quality of life that comes along with it. Sweden in 1996 decided to decarbonize its society. It slapped $150 a ton tax on carbon. It closed its two biggest nuclear power plants at the same time. And today, Sweden is the sixth richest country by GDP on the face of the earth.